a museum is an important building in the city. Louvre actually is probably, I think, the #1 monument of France. I think it's more important than the Eiffel Tower. And so if you touch it, all you have to do is do something to it. Somebody's going to tell you, you're wrong, don't touch it. That's normal. If I were French, I would feel the same way. When I first showed the idea to the public, I would say 90% were against it. I'm not exaggerating. No, I would say the first year and a half was really hell. I really couldn't walk the streets of Paris without people walking and look at me as if to say, there you go again, what are you doing here? What are you doing to us? What are you doing to our great Louvre? But to respect tradition, you also have to think about the need for change. And Louvre have to change, there's no question about it. But how to make that change? How to make history live, and at the same time, point the way to the future? I don't know. I'm trying. The French weren't that ready for change at that time. It took a while before that calmed down. And I have critics right now already in China, but I know that China is ready for change. I know China better than I knew France. And China is entering into the modern world. And they think, rightly or wrongly, that I can make a contribution. So I'm back. Chinese architecture really doesn't have a sense of direction. Since Ming Dynasty, there really hasn't been anything that one can say this is the Renaissance of Chinese architecture. None. An interruption of 500 years. That's serious. And there lies the challenge. I'm not so sure I can succeed, but someone has to begin. I take it very seriously. I was born in this country. I was educated in this country. My family was in Suzhou 600 years, so I have an attachment to it. So when they came to ask me to design a museum for them in Suzhou, I find it difficult to resist. But what a difference between French architecture and the Chinese. Suzhou is surrounded by water. Water is everywhere. It's a very poetic place. But most important, I think, when you look at Suzhou, you have to think of Suzhou as a city that's 2,500 years old. Built of wood and built of tile and brick. So this is a small-scale city. It's a human-scale city. And it's a city for life, for people living there. And as such, I think the museum has to reflect this tradition. At the same time, one has to think about change. Suzhou cannot remain like this forever. It has to have a chance to renew itself, to become modern.
够精。我住在这，我是58年住到这里的。 本来有20来家人家的，这儿住了有10几家人家。一是雨门呢，一是可以通单，我逼了。那么呢，这台地呢，那个就是后这个属于中央负责。给咱们那个是国家的大势所趋了，台湾是搿个受罪搿个啥搿个新的博物馆对了，所以你来巴西来讲，从解决用市政府它是搿个上级的支持了对。那么给咱作为一种就业场合，生活也多也普，那么作为老百姓侪是喏搿蛮太意对了，搿个你讲自家要出资，肯定是不可能的事体。那么是一种房子，你们基本上属于年纪大的人们，总该不想动，想等来一台一直搭戏。
平方米的老沟，600平方米的是深沟，一进去看你就知道。
我慢慢来，我一步步来。At this stage of my life, I really don't need to do anymore because I've done enough in my life. I feel that this is something that I have to do. This I have to do.
它这个建筑呢，实际上就是明代建筑。
对啊。
它整个结构，你看这个彩绘，所以它这里的彩绘。
And I think a modern art museum is the right contribution. The question, of course, is it right? 不树桥。底下这个是 border 在什么地方？
那个贝先生，就到这儿为止。
哦，这个是完全是崔正元的。
对。这就平江院后来跳的。
有什么东西要保存的？对，你说是没有什么东西值得保存。
这边一片的房子呢，对了，是建的时期比较晚，质量比较差。所以我们做了一个调查，值得保护的，我们主要是在狮子林的北面。
其余都可以拆。对。就是要想一想哪能办法，哪能啥个地方要保留，啥个地方要拆它。这个房子个质量，新的用有可以古为新用啊？
可以啊，
可以古为新用。
可以。
The search for an expression of Chinese architecture is not easily undertaken by anyone, and least of all by myself, because I lived 70 years of my life in the United States. I'm a foreigner here. 这个会转，都是会转。这个整个东西都会转。听缝斗拱也是跟着这个。都是。So it's not easy. This is more than a technical problem. It's not how to structure. No, not. It's more than that. It's a question of finding the spirit of the place, the history of the place. I myself did something in Hong Kong, a 72-story building, which is, I think, quite modern. But at the same time, it's Chinese in spirit. This building is like bamboo. You know, bamboo has knots. And for every knot that they add on, the bamboo gets taller. Bank of China shoots up from a very broad base, and then eventually to something which is much more slender. All the strength of this building is on the skin, it's on the outside. It's just like bamboo. Bamboo is hollow inside, but the skin is what gives it strength. So this building has the same kind of structural reasoning behind it. This one is very typically Hong Kong. But the building has very sharp angles, and that is not feng shui. Hong Kong is a place where feng shui play a very important part in people's life. And therefore, they predicted that the building will fail economically, in fact. But it's still here. I was aware of it, but I made light of it. And of course, I suffer some severe criticism from this group of people. Oh, that's fun. That's very nice.
Mr. Pei.
Thanks. I remember you.
Yes.
Public opinion is very important from the very beginning. You have to take the public in from day one. But something has to change, and it has to be right. And I'm not going to try to follow the old, because it would be wrong.
So you've got the China Bank, this late modern building that twists as it goes up, full of angles. And the Chinese say this is bad feng shui. But Pei, ever the suave, diplomatic maneuverer, manages to convince them that it's all right. And the building works brilliantly. He learned that. And being an architect, you had to become an advocate, a lawyer, and work with the local people to push forward their tastes. And it's the same situation for Pei and Suzhou.
I think the model turned out all right.
Yes, I think so. Nice. The architecture we're trying to do here is to continue this gray and white color, which you see all over Suzhou. These trees are pretty gray, huh? Yeah. It looks like we're part of the city, huh? They would like that. In that sense, this building may look very much like the rest of Suzhou, and yet really it's already changed. The new is inside. It's in space and in light. When they walk in, they say, no, this is something very new.
You're anxious to find out what this looks like.
They are? Yeah. Our friend's coming, huh?
Yes.
Where Chinatown?
Chinatown dim sum place.
Oh, dim sum.
This is a group from Suzhou, members of the Planning Bureau and the museum, and they're here to meet with our team. So we're looking forward and anxious to find out how they'll react to our design. Nobody has seen anything, so this will be a surprise to everybody. We hope the approval can happen rather quickly, and hopefully the project can go forward from this point.
This is the conceptual phase, so the question, of course, is how quickly we can get approval. We still have to take on 2 or 3 other steps, and I don't want any sort of a slack in between. That's the only way I feel that we can do this project. Because if I can't see the building to conclusion, I don't want to do it. And I know my limits. 大家看不知道美术馆是在什么地方，那看不出我们这很成功，因为这个苏州这个风格很重，清楚，对，苏州风格沙漠那是大对这个灰白色，可是现在的话，这个房屋里面呢要改呀，采光怎么阳光，怎么拿这个空间怎么做，这里面你们可以看一看，这里面是新的很新啊，你要看一看，书画那个时候到第2层了，屋里上哪里要用？
你现在最高点是这个是吧？15米。
这个差不多15米。
这个几码？就这个是我们规划的。
对。6米是吧？
We were actually moving forward, but there's one person from the planning office who's a little bit more conservative and wanted to remind us that we didn't satisfy this height limit ordinance or code.
现在高度方面要请你们研究一下，很多这个文征明的字啊，种种都很好的东西，所以这个我们希望特殊一点摆在第2层，要上去看。
We are finding that this project, because of its prominence and because of my father's, actually because of his involvement, has prompted the Chinese government, central government, to become much more interested in what is going on here.
这里建筑啊，河道形成的环境啊，希望能够保护，
一定要保护。
This is a current obstacle that we need to overcome quickly because backtracking is always a problem.
停车位主要停小车。
But probably most importantly, we're trying to do the best we can to maximize whatever time my father has available remaining.
这个屋面材料用新材料，石头，屋面的材料。
用灰瓦呢，那是过了，我们不能用这个办法。所以我们要想新的办法怎么做。你们大家都说应该要苏州的风度，那是对的，应该有苏州的风度。可同时，我们现在21世纪 ，Does it turn out? Another question they raise is the roof. Should we use tile roof? And we're using stone roof. I'm severely criticized. I said, Mr. Pei, I like your design, but I think you make a big mistake. You should use tile roof. This is a tradition in Suzhou. I say, I'm sorry, I don't know how to do a building like that. The reason is because tile roof is so strong a personality. It actually makes it impossible for you to make form out of it, because the roof is absolutely too dominant. So to take the roof away is the remove of a tyranny which makes it possible to innovate.
I understand why Pei was worried about doing tile roofs in Suzhou because, first of all, it would constrain him. It would make the roof very big and heavy as it was in the past. And he wants to turn the wall into a roof and then back into a wall and then into a roof. He wants to play a game. It's very much a Pei trademark. The difficulty was that China was changing very quickly, and the officials were very conscious that Suzhou was the last great city. So they wanted to hold on to every bit they could and mandated in the heart of Suzhou traditional construction. But Pei said, I'm not going to do that. And he convinced the officials it's all right not to do tiles. You know, Pei is a fighter, and he had to fight with the Chinese too.
It really is awfully difficult for anybody from the outside to begin to understand how big the controversy is with building such a major modern building right in the heart of old Suzhou.
Suzhou is one of the most beautiful, desirable cities in China. Dignitaries and highly respected intellectuals would choose to live there for hundreds of years. And I think as an architect, to have Suzhou in Pei's childhood, that is definitely very significant.
Suzhou was an extremely important city, financially and culturally. By the 15th century, you have the artists, the craftsmen, the jade carvers, the metal workers, everybody producing the most refined works of art in all of China. I mean, it was a tremendous concentration of wealth and learning.
Suzhou produced great painters, great calligraphers, great writers. There's nothing like Suzhou. You say, what about Venice? I said, not Venice. What about Amsterdam? I said, not Amsterdam. There's no place like Suzhou. And when I left, I wasn't really that aware of the place that I came from.
I.M. Pei left China in the 30s and arrived in America as a student. He came out of Harvard, where he was taught abstract modern architecture. Everything was impersonal, heavy, concrete, monumental, alienating, repetitive, deadly repetitive. It was boring boxes for everywhere. No history, no style. So Pei was designing his thesis It's your final project, and you can choose the kind of commission you want. So your idealism should come out. And he slightly rebelled, and he said, well, you know, I want to design a museum for Shanghai. The professor said, why would you do that? And Pei said, well, because I come from China, and I want to bring nature into my work. And so he designed this very interesting museum on many levels with cantilevers that were modern and concrete and abstraction, all of that. And it was a kind of memory of his growing up in the gardens of Suzhou. And so he brought nature in.
He was trying to bring together elements of the past, traditional Chinese architecture, with a contemporary modern language or vocabulary, and to find something which reflected both.
I understand that I.M. Pei once called this an impossible dream. This bringing together modern architecture with tradition. I mean, you can stick a Chinese curved roof on a modern building, and there are quite a few of those in China now. But it is a very difficult challenge to do this in any way that is not simply trivial.
It's very important to think that back in the 1940s, in the Shanghai Museum, that little seed of hope to invent a Chinese modern architecture is growing. And now, in his late 80s, Pei's asked to design a modern museum to house the antiques of Suzhou. So that seed has grown into an oak, and he's thinking again, as he did at Harvard, I will try, in my way, to open the door to an authentic Chinese architecture.
You're very welcome to the Sheraton Suzhou. It's an honor to have you here.
Well, very nice. Nice to be back. What have we got? I haven't seen.
The drawings haven't been, yeah.
Now, let's see.
They turned out all right.
Very good. Richard, your tree is beautiful.
You like the tree?
Yes, it's beautiful. Now, the color is not dark enough, but that's very successful. With that wood frame around it, make it more precious.
We really did take lots of models. We went from A to, I think we're maybe at, I don't know, F or G right now. We made changes. There were issues about height and scale and roof material. Sometimes we wouldn't change, but we would at least have to address their criticisms. And we did that, and I think we, in the process, earned their respect because we didn't dismiss what their comments were. We took them very seriously. We all agreed to satisfy the height limit code restrictions, and in doing so, we've had to put a certain amount of the program below ground. We had to find a way to bring natural light into some of these areas. But of course, my father has so much experience in the geometries and how we filter light into the space. The client, which is the Suzhou government, was happy with the final design. And my father was particularly good at bringing them on board.
他在自己的家乡设计这样的一个重大的建筑的话， 他也相信家乡人民对他的建筑也是倍加的关注，中国人民对他的建筑也是倍加关注。他们说他对自己的亲属和朋友，在动手术的时候，往往手要发抖。我相信，可能贝先生有这样的一个心情。
尊敬的国家苏州市领导，谢谢你们今天来。可是建筑呢，在这块地啊，是特别这个挑战，因为我们是在文化保护区里面。我跟诸位说，我们现在我们事务所啊，好多代表在这儿，希望将来跟你们合作。做成一个建筑，可以说是疏而兴，不是容易。不过我们要想办法，找那一头。可要成功的话，要靠诸位帮助。我谢谢你们，预先谢谢。
This is the future museum site, and I understand not all of the residents have moved out yet, but I think soon they're all going to be moving out. All these buildings are old. Maybe outside they look poetic, but inside it's very poor living conditions.
It's a matter of principle to me, how to go to the next century. But it's a sensitive subject with the public, and I'm not unaware of it.
Some people were really unhappy about what was going on, especially if they had been living there. It was the destruction of their own community that they were seeing. But beyond that, for the Chinese who were watching, many had witnessed this before. And there may have been memories of the enormous destruction that had taken place during the Cultural Revolution. All through the Mao days, these people had seen many magnificent old buildings wiped out.
Mao destroyed traditional Chinese culture. He destroyed old Beijing. He tore down the walls.
There was an exodus of certain people out of China, and my father, by the way, always thought he was going to go back. I mean, he had a good life in China, was from a very prominent family. Why wouldn't you go back? Now, he graduated in 1939, and by that time, you had the Japanese occupation, and then you had the nationalist communist battles. And his father kept on saying, not yet, it's not the time. And then, of course, by 1949, then it was, too late.
Mao, of course, couldn't wait to modernize and saw traditional Chinese culture as a major obstacle. The Cultural Revolution was the extreme expression of this. So whereas the West modernized very gradually and largely voluntarily, China wiped a great deal of the slate clean. But the communists didn't think very much when they were planning buildings.
The communist architecture was awful. It was a whole series of cheap, thrown-up buildings without any architectural invention or integrity. And in the last 20 years, China was taken over by bad modernism, the kind of awful jerry-built high-rises that are going up all over Beijing, and then every single city. And Ian Pei feels that his mission is to take this mad destruction and mad creation and give it some kind of direction.
The basement's complete, the ground floor is coming up. The building is now under construction. That will be the first challenge. Second challenge is how to exhibit art. This is a museum. So to begin with, they built a room to exhibit the collection. A full-size maquette with a roof and a wall all built. It's something I'm very anxious to see because it will give me an idea as to whether we're going about in the right way.
哪个朝代？
春秋。
春秋
不过2500多年。
春秋。
这种呢是要底座一加，就像这种东西呢，这个底座没有加。我们就是以后呢，所有的器物像这个印章啊，你看中国世界上最大的犀牛角，正德皇帝赐给皇后的，这个是放酒的，针酒，马上杯啊，就是将军骑在马上，他就是，这看起都说话。
Mr. Pei went right to how the galleries were going to be treated. That was very important to him. With a lot of the museums that you see today, it's all about big formal manipulations, big moves. Here, with the collection at the museum, we really couldn't do that.
我觉得这个声音很厉害，因为这种东西这么细的东西，这个太粗了啊，细一点啊，你对吗？因为它这个真的很重，这个很重，这种都不是。It's too powerful for the object.
Right.
The object is very small. The art objects of Suzhou, porcelain, ivory, that sort of thing, they're not intended for palaces. They're likely to be very small, that you want to see it in a small room. So therefore, to exhibit these little objects is much more difficult than to do a tapestry or do a big Michelangelo sculpture or something like that. So it's a very different kind of challenge. There's lots of light coming in from there. Yes. The scale of the room is not bad. We have a smaller.
People say that this is maybe his last project. He takes this very, very personally, and he's quite sensitive in this project to the comments that are coming to him as well. We see him a lot more frequently on this project than we normally do. And he spent quite a bit of time and energy on this. I mean, this is really close to his heart.
米芾所属，米芾也特别喜欢。
That's my name.
米芾。
That's one of my names. Mi Fu's calligraphy, my gosh. Beautiful calligraphy. Su Chao set the direction for me. I like to contribute something to a place where my family has prospered 600 years. And also my memory of China is stronger here in this town than in any other place. My recollection of Suzhou is a city of gardens. And of course, those are not like Western gardens. They are full of water and beautiful rocks. My uncle owned this place. It was one of the biggest gardens there. And so I played here when I was a little boy. I used to play hide and seek here. It's a wonderful place to play hide and seek. You can make believe in this place, in the midst of all these strange-looking rocks. For example, there are two stones there that look like lions, you know. Now, these stones are very special. They came from stone farmers. That's an interesting term. Why? Because these stone farmers collected a piece of stone. Now, he's also a sculptor. And if he saw possibilities in that stone, he decided to cut holes in the stone or something that he thinks would make the stone a little more special. But of course, the stone looks rough like this. So this farmer will put the stone in the lake, and the ebb and flow of the tide will soften the rough edges. And after 10 or 20 years, they will sell that stone and make gardens out of it. So that's why they call them farmers, because the father sows and the son reaps. The garden is always the heart of Chinese architecture. And some of the elements of a Chinese garden will be incorporated into the museum. In fact, the garden is actually more important to me than the buildings. But it's the garden I'm least confident about, especially what to do with the rocks. I'm not going to use rocks the same old way. I can't. And even if I try, I won't be able to do it as well. So therefore, why try? So there must be a new way. And that new way is something I'm searching. But I'm not confident that I have the solution yet. 将来有几颗，一共几颗？
将来可以，这个只不过一半而已，将来要30多块。
这个两个很好，配的
非常好。
这两块，
这两个自然的，
跟那个也许两面的线条应该相近，不过总之好像，就这灰颜色是切了以后有。
切了当中的灰颜色。And the top of the stone has a lot of dust from cutting.
Yes.
So it's still very white.
These rocks are cut. And the natural silhouette of the stone after you cut it has an edge to it. It's quite interesting, not unlike Chinese paintings.
中国的山水画的感觉。
这个是跟米芾的画。米芾的画，我知道。So what we're trying to do is find a new way to use rocks, model after Chinese paintings that have the silhouette of mountains.
天门中站出江开。
So it's an experiment, painting with stones. Whether we will succeed or not, I don't know. But if we don't succeed, I tell you, I don't know what to do. And maybe we cannot use rocks anymore because we don't know how. We don't have the skill, and furthermore, we don't have the time.
一年可以把它长出来了，今年它也长出来了。那个对，跟背心差。
我都不要啊，有一点太阳晒，太阳晒不成问题，
稍微晒晒。
现在是怎么做？这个是，怎么做？是这个有一点问题，前后好像连在一起了。 最要紧那个尸皮啊，就是贴的石头，也可以看见，也要看见尸皮。可以。那这样可以接下去，就是这样，好像画画一样。
有连贯性，
颜色洗的深一点的话，更明显。做一个远山的感觉，这是近处。
When Mr. Pei was looking at the mock-up for the first time, there's no sense of perspective. That's one of the worries when he first saw these rocks. They do look rather flat because the color was very uniform. So we decided to create this shade, burning some of the rocks. I must tell you, even 2 days before Mr. Pei came, I talked to some officials. They said, well, the garden is a very important thing, but we're just not sure about these rocks. Have a look. We're still kind of experimenting with the process, but so far I think it's getting closer to what the Song painting would be like in a real sense, three-dimensional sense.
Now this part is torch. It is torched too much. The sharpness of this line is gone there, but we want to torch less the next time.
You have this thickness, but maybe it's good to keep some of
the sharpness.
Ones.
But this has a lot of character. 上面这个也要做，
这个棱角也搞掉。
烧，所有高的高峰啊，都要弄烧。有一点雾呢，因为中国的山水啊，就是庙在这个地方。Now we know what to do. Let's see if we can do something. But definitely.
Yeah, much better.
Well, this is an interesting experiment.
这个虽然是用现代的工艺，但是很中国，还是很中国，
很中国，
很中国。
这个很重要，从你的说出来，我这心很定一点。
Here in China, when we're working with Mr. Pei together, one thing I think I see that even my colleagues in New York don't is the Chinese side of Mr. Pei. Because when he's thinking of the gardens, when he's talking to me in Chinese, in Suzhou dialect, I get to see the Chinese sensibility of Mr. Pei, which got into him many years ago. But this is actually Mr. Pei's final trip to China before the opening. At his age, he can't travel as much as he would like to, so we just have to travel for him and to report to him of what's going on.
This is with regret that I have to leave now. I should stay longer. Bye-bye.
One more picture.
But I can't do it anymore because I can't fly here all the time as I used to, you know. So it's very uncomfortable for me to leave, knowing that there's so much that left to be done.
Every building has its own challenges. And, you know, one of the hallmarks, I think, of my father's work is all the details. And, you know, getting all the details right in a country like China is never easy. I mean, I think of the rocks that are in the garden. Nobody had ever done that before. What was it supposed to be like? How do you do it? I mean, the idea had come pretty quickly, but an idea is no good if you can't execute it.
During the construction of the rockscape, we had a vision in our eye of what we want to see, but it was a messy construction site. Pieces are just cut, you have concrete foundations exposed, and Mr. Pei was anxious.
And he was trying to do this from a long distance because he wasn't there for a lot of this. It was so we'd have photographs sent back from Suzhou, and he'd look at the photographs and say, well, you know, this rock needs to move over 6 inches here and move this one back 2 feet. Trying to communicate this over 10,000 miles and 12 hours of time difference is a challenge. And you know, these are big rocks, and to move them a few feet might take a whole day. So the amount of effort that went into it shows that he was really engaged in trying to do something interesting.
All through his career, it was the details that Pei really sweated over. He produced a precisionist, elegant, minimalist architecture. And when he designs the Suzhou Museum, he's ultimately thinking, I will give back to China. I will try, in my way, to fully engage with the tradition of Chinese architecture and meld it with the modern techniques, with stucco, steel and glass, and concrete. You see, he turned concrete from a heavy, brutal material into a silken Chinese scroll painting. In the end of his life, I mean, at 90, he does the best concrete in the world. You touch it, you think, well, I'd like to wear that. But the Suzhou Museum is modest, and there's where Pei's modesty is very important. He knows that if there is going to be a rebirth of Chinese architecture, it's not going to be one building, but it is going to be a series of steps. And I think this building is a great step in his giving to China a direction.
So, 可否在这个后来啊，我觉得这个机会是非常难得。我在苏州，我也住过好一场，我对于苏州的感情啊，也是很深的。我很希望有这个机会啊，可以留点纪念。这个新馆，这是我希望，是我的跟你们的小小的贡献，致敬，谢谢。
Suzhou Museum, I think of it as part of me. And so in many ways, this project is a biography for myself. And what little I remember of China. You see, I left when I was quite young. So what I remember of China is purely one of nostalgia, actually. I wasn't, but it gave me a chance to somehow to make a physical expression of what I remember. Whether I've captured it, I don't know. You have to ask them. People going in, do they feel that this is old China or this is new China? I don't know. But I hope that they think this is China.
I think he has created a totally original work of art. And I tell you something which is quite interesting. Many great Chinese artists do their best work in their very late years. And that's something that doesn't happen elsewhere. I mean, that not as much as in China anyway. And is a modern example of that. I think something of Suzhou has always been with him. And it's a subject that he's held, I think, in his heart for a long time, and it comes out with the master's brush.
Chinese people can be very still and quiet for a long time, but they remember. They have long memories. I mean, even as a student back in the 1940s, Pei was thinking, I'm going to give you a new, authentic Chinese architecture, the first you've had since the Ming. And now, at the end of his long career, the Suzhou Museum is in many ways a very graceful and lyrical essay in his idea. And it's really the culmination of this dream which he had at Harvard.
The building is very elegant, subtle, but to actually have one of his last pieces return back to where he is from, I think that journey as a career is grand, is noble, and it's very Chinese. I mean, always return home when you're successful. Only come home when you're doing better than your ancestors. I don't know if I.M. is very conscious about it, but that act of coming home with actually doing the most important building is one of the Chinese virtues.
I left China in 1935, so I returned to Suzhou almost as an outsider, looking back at a place that I remember. But was I prepared to deal with it? I don't know whether I did, but I tried to. What little I remember of China, I tried to put it back into this building. So I like to think that this is a Suzhou place that I've created. Suzhou Museum was an exciting journey for me. And it was a challenging one, but I faced that challenge with a great deal of interest. Looking back at it, I think it is my return to home, so to speak.
To learn more about I.M. Pei, visit pbs.org.